Hello and welcome back. This is the continuation of Craniopagus by Copper Rhodes, Chapter 6. The story of One-Eyed Jacks was an interesting one, admittedly. John didn't know what to do with the knowledge that Johnny had killed his own father, but as he sang, he swore he could feel what Johnny did. How somber the song made him, like he was still that young man, still holding the gun and watching their father bleed out. He could hear their father forgive them, and felt the tears that stung their eyes as they said goodbye. It was strange and concerning in many ways, but it also made him understand why he would sing such a song, because it was more than just putting on a show or telling a story. It was therapeutic, as odd as it sounded, because even after hundreds of years, John knew that Johnny still thought about his old world. To a father he still loved, even if he tried to hide it. More than that, he knew Johnny's regret, even if he would never admit it out loud. So he was quiet, and he let him sing until the song was done. And when it was over, Johnny waited for the questions he fully expected to come. Because John always seemed to have questions, but not this time. This time he didn't ask any of the number of questions that came to mind. Instead, they stood quietly under the spray of the shower, their eyes burned and their breath warbled, but neither of them was willing to acknowledge it. Johnny didn't get sad over the songs the mechanism sang, hadn't genuinely cried in a few hundred years, and yet he could feel John feeling his own emotions, and then he felt those feelings right back. To be frank, John was much a more emotional person than he ever had been. Those emotions almost seemed to magnify his own. Like an echo, it bounced off the two, back and forth. It was overwhelming in a way, but also almost felt nice. Johnny thought for once just letting himself feel something he had long since buried. But then came the distorted mad giggling, and any pleasant thoughts were dashed away all at once. John yelped and jumped in surprise at the first crackle of static. With absolutely no grace at all, he managed to slip and fall on his ass. The pair of unnatural voices seemed to cackle even harder, giving him a headache and making his teeth hurt in a way that certainly wasn't natural. "Well now, that was a fun story, wasn't it?" An odd, static-filled voice spoke. "They do know how to put on a show, don't they?" "Indeed." Another equally unnatural voice giggled. "I told you, didn't I? Much more interesting now." With a groan, John realized that somehow him being startled had forcefully taken control back from Johnny. He didn't love that, especially given that they apparently had guests. Slowly, he turned to see two figures standing in a doorway at the far side of the showers, a doorway that certainly hadn't been there before. It took him a moment to fully process what he was looking at. He knew the distortion, was barely surprised by it anymore, but then why was there a second? The first of the figures he knew better than he cared to, but the second figure took him a moment to identify. More than that, once he did recognize her, he found him baffled by why she looked like that. The two were similar, and possibly tall and unnaturally thin, their fingers like knives, their hair big and curly, though not quite in the same ways. Their physical forms almost blurred at the edges, and they both sported toothy Cheshire grins that were much too wide. But they also seemed to contrast each other, almost too perfectly, for it not to be intentional. One pale with wheat blonde hair, the other had a dark skin and was a brunette. First wore casual clothes, a pale yellow jumper, faded jeans, old boots, an oversized scarf that was a terribly ugly shade of lime green. The other was dressed rather sharp, if the pun could be forgiven. A white dress shirt under a deep, almost oversaturated purple suit jacket with a pencil skirt to match, and a black pair of heels that audibly kicked as she made her way fully out of the doorway. He never would have guessed that the spiral might have a sense of design, or irony for that matter, but the two seemed almost like they were made to be each other's foils, at least in appearance, because in practice they were linking their arms and leaning into each other in an almost surprisingly friendly way. John was slack-jaw for a moment and began to stand as he stared at the pair, never taking his eyes away if he could help it. He may need to run from these two. Johnny might have been capable, but he wasn't sure he could fight off the distortion, let alone whatever this new entity was. Michael. He began once he was fully off the ground. The blonde almost looked coy as it twiddled its fingers in his direction. "Hello, archivist." Then he looked at the second figure. He knew this woman, recognized her perhaps better than he should have. They had only met once, but her face was burned into his memory. "Helen?" "Hello, John," she answered back much too casually for his liking, and then cocked her head as her eyes seemed to drift down. "Are you aware you're naked?" Fuck! His face was scarlet in an instant, and he immediately forgot about watching them to turn away from the pair. He covered his shame as best as he could, and felt horribly pitiful in the process. What are either of you even doing here?" "We thought we'd come say hello, reintroduce myself and all that," Helen explained like it was nothing at all. Her heels clicked loud on the tile floor as she began to move around the room, eyeing him further. "And to properly thank you, of course," Michael added, staying put as his companion circled him, though John somehow knew it was eyeing him as well. He didn't like any of this. Not one bit. "Thank me?" He awkwardly tried to look between the two of them without fully turning around to face them. Fuck, what he would give for a towel in that moment. "You know, I think I've seen a few pornos start out like this," Johnny piped up, being as unhelpful as ever. He perhaps was trying to lighten the mood. It was absolutely not working. "If one of them pulls out a pizza, you should probably run. I mean, unless you're—" "Shut the fuck up, Johnny," John hissed. He would not be entertaining any such train of thought. No, thank you. The pair, thankfully, didn't know the full extent of their conversation, and instead only snickered at the parts they could hear. My, you two certainly are a lively pair," Helen complimented in a teasing kind of way. "It really has inspired us, you know." "Inspired you?" He looked at her for perhaps too long, because it was beginning to hurt his eyes the longer he stared at either of them. It was like their outlines were becoming more fuzzy, almost like smudged watercolor in a way. It was confusing, and I had to turn away from it or risk a migraine settling in. I don't understand. What does that mean exactly?" "I told you, didn't I? I said before that you had given me much to think about," Michael explained further. It clapped its hands together as though it were giddy. "Seeing you with your double, it was fascinating, and we found ourselves reevaluating things. Not just for myself, but the twisting seed even seemed to understand something new from seeing you two. It got us thinking." "If the archivist can be 2 in 1, Helen cut in. She circled back around until she was beside Michael once more. They intertwined themselves with each other, Helen looping her long arm around Michael's torso twice over, while Michael wrapped its arms around her shoulder, and he held the other long bony hand with its own. They pressed each other's faces together, cheek to cheek, and their terrible, frustrating grins continued to grow wider still. They posed almost like they were old friends, and not two hollowed-out captives of the spiral. Something about the sight filled John with dread. Michael finished Helen's thought. Then what stops the distortion from being 1 and 2? It looked far too pleased by the idea of there being 2 of them now, and John felt like a stone had settled in the pit of his stomach. 2 distortions? 2 entities using those awful doors to take and consume people? He couldn't think of anything worse in that instance, and when the 2 of them had been human, neither of them wanted to be this, whatever this truly was. But they looked so happy. John shuddered at the thought of these 2 who were once people, who were once opposed to the spiral in their own ways, were now gleefully its servants. What? He stammered. "Why are you telling me this? Last time I saw you, you wanted me dead. Is this you gloating, taunting me before you finish what you started in the waxworks building?" Helen gave a thoughtful hum. The long arm wrapped around Michael was brought up, and her fingers drummed against her cheek like she was really considering the question. "Now why would we try and kill you, John? Did you forget you're immortal now?" "It could be quite fun to try, though," Michael suggested, giving a small laugh that made it sound almost like it was again teasing him. "Though that would go against the very reason we came here." "So there's an actual reason you're here?" The twisted pair nodded, but didn't elaborate, causing him to give an exasperated sound. Well, Why are you here then if you don't plan to kill me?
We already told you. You aren't a terribly good listener, are you, John? Helen chided. We came to thank you.
For what? I hardly did anything. John was getting frustrated, which might have served him just as fine against Elias, but he wasn't sure it would end well with these two. Relax, Sims. Don't get worked up. That's clearly what they want. Michael laughed again, almost seeming to prove Johnny right. But you did! With your help, I now have my twin, just as you do your own. It spoke rather fondly, looking only at Helen then. Someone to share in this twisted, distorted, maddening existence, for as long as it may last, whether that be forever or sometime significantly less. Oh, well, you almost made it sound like you were lonely before, he pondered out loud. It really was a fascinating experience that such a being might experience loneliness just as a human might. Then again, Michael Shelley had been human once before. The distortion, and by extension presumably the spiral as well, seems to think that there was nothing left of Michael, but John had his doubts. Both Michael and Helen clearly didn't share his sentiment, because both of them frowned then, their arms sagging until they looked like stretched out taffy. They unwound themselves from each other, both crossing their arm, almost looking petulant, and oddly, their blurred outlines actually seemed to come more into focus as a result of their frustrations with him. Loneliness is not within our nature, Archivist. Michael spoke the words like a warning. His eyes had snapped back onto him, laser-focused now. Such things are for other entities. Our brand of fear is much more abstract. I tread carefully with what you say, John. Someone much less friendly might take you saying that as an insult. Helen narrowed her eyes at him before she continued. We are, after all, here to express our gratitude and extending our friendship as thanks for what you've done for us. If friendship is something you so desire, Michael added, surely you and your own twin could use all the friends you could get, given the number of enemies you deemed fit to make on this day. John swallowed hard and found himself considering their words carefully. Friendship with the distortion? The thing that mocked him and threatened him to even cut him? This thing had tormented him on more than a few occasions, and it thought John wanted to be its friend? But with their tone, how would they respond if John refused? Would they be violent or stay petulant about it? Perhaps this was an excuse to attack. If he refused, they would take it as an insult and try and kill him. But if he said yes, then what? Were they actually friends then, or was there some secondary trap if they accepted the offer? Besides that, it wouldn't matter soon enough. He wouldn't have this body long enough to make use of such a friendship anyway, and he doubted Johnny would have any interest in maintaining a friendship with the two either. It was hard to say if Johnny was proving his point or doing the exact opposite when he spoke again, almost like he whispered this time. I've lived alone enough but I've never actually gotten to know twins before. He started, and John could feel where this conversation was going. I know we only have 3 bodies between us, but do you think you would count as one? Or Johnny, I am literally begging you to stop making sex jokes right now. Could this man take anything seriously? Was everyone just trying to fuck with him today? The so-called twin distortion cocked their heads in unison at the comment. They seemed confused by it, and almost seemed to draw back when they heard them. By some miracle, they didn't press for details, didn't even laugh at this time. Perhaps they, like John, were uncomfortable with such a thought. They didn't like that at all, Johnny said, sounding almost surprised. Well, why on earth would they? John demanded. He laughed back. I thought at least they would get a laugh out of it. I mean, they're the ones coming on a little strong. You don't typically confront someone in the shower unless you're hoping to fuck or go for a surprise attack. So they announced themselves. You'd figure that, but... He paused and then sounded like he was considering something. If I had to guess, they probably don't even have the biology for something like that anymore. I doubt the spiral, whatever it really is, would have any use for it either. Good lord, one can only hope. He sighed then, wondering if being friends with the distortion would really be any worse than sharing a body with Johnny. Sure, he wasn't all bad, and he was honestly growing fond of his other half, but goodness could the man be obnoxious when he wanted to be, and it seemed he wanted to be obnoxious more often than not. For now, they probably wouldn't try to kill him if they considered him to be their friend, right? It was worth a shot. Alright, friends. He decided to tread carefully. Perhaps we can further discuss what this friendship entails later, when I'm dry and have clothes on. Their expression changed in an instant. Their grins returned and they giggled in unison, like his suggestion was delightfully silly. Oh, Archivist, we hardly mind. Clothing makes no difference to us, Michael insisted. They're not doing a very good job at convincing me that they don't want to fuck. Johnny, what did I just say? He groaned and pinched the bridge of his nose. These people would be the death of his sanity, if nothing else. Eventually, he looked at the distortions. It makes a difference to me, he huffed. So unless your friendship comes with a towel and a change of clothes, I would appreciate it if you would come back later. The pair hummed to themselves and then shrugged, far too perfectly in sync with each other for John's liking. Oh, very well, Helen said as she turned away from him and started towards their door. We'll come back another time, when you're feeling less modest. Farewell for now, Archivist and Space Pirate. Michael waved to him again, and it began to follow its new twin, but then it paused and gave a curious look towards the exit out to the locker room. And what perfect timing! It would seem you have another visitor. Farewell to you as well, assistant. And with that, they stepped through their door, and in a blink of an eye, it was as if a door was never there at all. Assistant? Johnny parroted back the word. Is Martin already here? John's eyes went wide, and he immediately looked towards the entrance to the showers. Was Martin already here? He had expected him to show up eventually, but he had hoped the other man would announce himself. He could barely stand the idea of Johnny seeing him naked. How was he supposed to handle the man he was infatuated with seeing him like this? No, absolutely not. Martin? His voice was a bit shaky as he squinted at the doorway. He expected Martin. It might have been easier if it was Martin. Would have made any kind of reasonable sense, but Martin wasn't standing there. Peeking past the doorframe, there they were. Basira, or rather Ashes, eyed the space the distortion disappeared through with confusion and suspicion, but eventually their eyes turned to John, and they stepped more into the shower room. After a few long seconds of the two of them saying nothing, Ashes finally spoke. Johnny? John froze. What exactly was he meant to do here? He didn't know much about Ashes other than what little Johnny had told them, and from the look on their face it was clear that Johnny was who they were there for, who they actually hoped was in control. Did he fake it or just let Johnny take control? Then again, the last time Johnny took the lead, someone got hurt. Of course, someone got hurt when John was in control as well, so perhaps neither of them were really fit to be in control. Fuck it, John decided he'd take a gamble for now, and he'd let Johnny take over if he didn't know how to respond or handle them. Ashes, he answered back, doing his best to sound like Johnny, and hoped it wasn't too obvious that he was putting on a front. It was surprisingly easy to make Johnny's tone and pitch. He had minored in theater in uni and found that he was quite good with voices. He never expected it to be useful in his career, but it had seemed that it served him more in the institution than it ever did in his time at school. For a beat, their face was still hard, scanning them for any kind of deception, before a smile had spread across their face. So you're back, too? Thank fuck, I want to be done with this shit planet and get back to the Aurora. Before he knew what was happening, they had closed the distance between them, going through the spray of the shower to get to him. He was slammed into the tile wall. They had brought him in a firm, aggressive kiss. It was more teeth and hands than anything else, and spoke to the history that Ashes and Johnny must have shared. And John panicked immediately. And that is all for today. Well, it's been a month, maybe. Or maybe 2. I'm not even quite sure anymore. Boy. So I just went through 2 theater productions that I was absolutely dying from. my track started back up, which means I'm running around just killing my legs constantly. It's been a lot. I haven't really gotten around to writing much or even recording much, obviously. I'm hoping to end this week that I have off to record as much as possible so there's still regular somewhat uploads. It's probably not gonna happen. If anything got posted this month, you know that it did happen. If not, well, you're gonna have to wait a while. I'm sorry. This chapter was crazy, though. It was, so when I first read this, the constant back and forth between the distortions and John not understanding anything was literally just, like, so frustrating for me. But then I realized that's probably the point. Like, the whole reason of the spiral is just to kind of go in circles a bit. Whether that be mentally or just... I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I hope you guys understand. Anyway, thank you for listening. Bye-bye. I hope you've all had a wonderful month or so. And I hope y'all didn't freeze out there, because I know I had been, and I'm so thankful for fucking spring. Anyway, bye! And drink water!